Princess Tutu is a whole lot of things, and there's a whole lot more on my mind about this show that I can comfortably write about or fit into a quick monthly YouTube video, so what I'm going to do here is briefly run through some of the more prominent things that stuck out to me during my viewing. This is Scattered Thoughts about Princess Tutu. First, I want to look at Princess Tutu as a fairy tale, because it invokes such stories in many ways throughout its run, from the music to the presentation and even some of the narrative beats. Before that, there is some distinction to be drawn between types of fairy tales or their era. What I mean is, when you say the phrase fairy tale, different people will think of different images. Some of the Brothers Grimm, some of the Disney princess. Tonally, I would say that Princess Tutu is more a match for the former, and if it at all invokes the latter, it's only to set itself up in contrast to it. For instance, almost right off the bat, Princess Tutu invokes the more modern fairy tale princess trope of a princess talking to and being friends with animals. Here, instead of our princess being on friendly terms with said animals, Ahiru just gets absolutely swarmed by birds, just completely destroyed in a scene right out of Alfred Hitchcock's Nightmares, which is a pretty clear signal that this isn't going to be a happy fairy tale. Ahiru is no Disney princess. This is going to be some Brothers Grimm shit. But that's just one brief element in the first episode. Other recurring elements throughout the series play into a more classic aesthetic. Most prominently, Princess Tutu's reliance on classical music can't help but invoke an older time. The scenes these pieces play in are given a sense of timelessness thanks to that score. You can very easily picture these pieces playing as the accompaniment. I'm never going to be able to say that word. Let's just pretend I can say it right. You can very easily picture these pieces playing as the accompaniment to a stage play hundreds of years ago. Perhaps a play based on the same folklore drawn upon by fairy tales and this show. And I bring up stage plays because that's another aesthetic element that this show calls to mind, not just from the music, but from its very theatrical presentation. The focus on ballet and dance, the deliberate use of spotlights, and even some characters in a climactic scene that, while they appear to be just humanoid animals like many other characters in the show, are actually people in animal costumes like you would see on the stage, all purposeful inclusions meant to call to mind a stage production. There's a lot you can draw out from these elements and references, which I'm not even sure I'm capable of processing, at least not right now. I call attention to the fairy tale elements because I find it to be an involving tonal choice. Consciously or not, these elements primed us to expect more than a happily ever after. Right from the start, both in the text and through these aesthetic elements, this show was telling us that it was a tragedy, but it's more than that, too. It uses those traditional fairy tales as a base for its own story. There are no heroic knights here, and the brave prince is most often helpless. This is a new sort of fairy tale, one in which the princess saves the day, and that is dope, bro. And as for the elements of the stage, those read to me, at least in part, as playing into the show's larger narrative about stories and storytelling, on top of adding an additional layer of suspended reality to the proceedings. These stage elements hint from the start that the events portrayed on screen are not necessarily the reality of that world, but rather a story within. When we watch a play on a stage, despite the performance taking place in the real world, as an audience we understand that what's occurring in front of us is not strictly real, despite our eyes telling us it is. And when we accept that faux reality, we can accept the incongruities that would not make sense in any other context. Like, it's perfectly fine for those kids on stage to start singing about how once they are jets all the way, because that's that world. But if you saw real kids on the street do that, you might wonder if you had too much to drink last night. Similarly, when Princess Tutu invokes elements of the stage, it hints that much of what is on screen is part of that storytelling reality. The talking animal characters are signaled from the start to be an oddity that would not belong in that world under normal circumstances, but because this is theater, a story, the characters within that story world accept them, and so too do we, whilst at least being more vigilant about their being. And I think those were my most significant observations, but so it looks like I've done my homework. Let me throw out a few other points here. Next, how does Princess Tutu fare as magical girl? fair. There's plenty of superficial commonalities you could easily list off, but what stuck out most to me was the element of transformation. Many magical girl shows share this element, usually in the form of a transformation sequence in which a girl magically dons a magic outfit for the purpose of fighting magically. These sequences typically have a girl gain power, both literally and figuratively, but what stuck out to me about the transformations in Tutu was not Tutu's corresponding magical girl transformation sequence. Rather, the most significant transformation in this series was of an animal into a human, of a duck into a girl, into Ahiru. That transformation and the inverse are the most common throughout the show, and while it can be seen to signify a gain or loss of power, I think the focus on this particular transformation communicates the various forms that power can take. While being human is obviously great, perfect existence, no flaws whatsoever, there are some things Ahiru can only do as a duck, and seeing things through the eyes of a duck allows her to better understand the world and the people around her. To draw a simple moral lesson from it, no matter who you are, big or small, girl or duck, as long as you're determined, you can make a difference. One last note I want to note. One of the thematic focuses of this series is death. There's a lot of narrative elements, big and small, that play into this theme, and those elements communicate different perspectives on that one universal human experience. Some of the episodic stories feature death as a driving force. For instance, the Baker lady in episode 3 lost her husband before the events of the episode. That episode is about maybe not overcoming that trauma, but learning to live with it and accept it and maybe move on. The very next episode is about a dead woman who has to come to terms with her own death, accept it, and move on to whatever's next. And then there's the overarching story elements. The whole town of Princess Tutu is caught in the machinations of a dead storyteller who couldn't let go of his stories and of his life, a man who perpetuated cycles of grief due to his inability to accept his own. And then there's Tutu herself, Ahiru, who, over the course of the series, has to come to terms with the effective death of her human self in order to do what's right and save the day. She certainly values herself, but she has plenty of warning, plenty of time to come to terms with and accept her fate, and she does. She exits satisfied that she had a good run of it, and that she was able to help protect the ones she loved. She learned to live a full life in the time she had. All that is to say that Princess Tutu is pretty obsessed with death, from grief to denial and acceptance, and that's about as grim as any old fairy tale I can think of, and that'll do it for me. In short, I was enamored by Princess Tutu, from its various presentation quirks, emotional storytelling, and stuff, just all the stuff. It was great. And if you disagree with that simple statement, then I'm afraid that I'll have no choice but to have you marry me. Thanks for sitting through my ramblings about a grim magical cartoon show. This has been a viewer's choice video, but wait! Before you hop in the comments, returning viewers, I'm remaking the selection process for the next viewer's choice video. Instead of leaving suggestions in the comments and upvoting those, I'm doing a poll. Link in the description. The first 3 entries on that poll are based on common requests from past videos, or my own interest. And as for the last one, well, I sort of half-jokingly suggested I'd do it in my All My Anime 2019 video, but then someone actually wanted it, so I figured I'd include it there. Voting ends a week from the upload date. Aside from that, the next video may be something completely different. Expect Kira Kira Precure in May. And that'll do it. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to be gay and do crimes.